On September 2nd, in front of the solemn mausoleum of Ho Chi Minh, American journalist Richard Hayes stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. The disciplined march of thousands of Vietnamese soldiers, the thunder of synchronized boots, the precision of formations, all unfolding with a power he had never anticipated. For a man who had built his career on skepticism, the scene struck him like a shockwave. Hayes had expected a hollow performance, yet what he faced was a reality that challenged his prejudice. A nation once scarred by poverty and war, now demonstrating strength, unity, and pride with uncompromising clarity. This was no fragile spectacle. It was the manifestation of resilience forged through decades of struggle. Hayes's mind could not escape history. He recalled black and white footage of the Vietnam War, when American forces, with their overwhelming firepower, tried to bend this small country into submission. Back then, the world pitied Vietnam, ravaged, impoverished, exhausted. And yet, that very nation had endured, resisted, and eventually defeated a superpower. Now standing on Ba Ding Square, Hayes confronted a paradox. The same Vietnam, once written off as weak and broken, now projected a strength that was unmistakable. The sight was not mere choreography, it was history speaking in flesh and steel. Still, his instincts as a reporter dragged him back to suspicion. Hayes had spent over 20 years dismissing mass parades as empty political theater. From the Middle East to Africa to Beijing, he had always seen only stagecraft. His editor's assignment to cover Vietnam's National Day Parade seemed no different, and Hayes had already drawn his conclusions before stepping on the plane. Forced smiles, mobilized crowds, identical flags. He had written the word coercion in bold across his notebook, convinced he would expose yet another manufactured display. But as the columns of soldiers moved with mechanical precision beneath Ho Chi Minh's towering portrait, as the crowds erupted with chants that carried the weight of pride rather than fear, Hayes felt his certainty tremble. The old narrative of Vietnam as a poor, war-torn country leaning on its past could no longer reconcile with the overwhelming reality before him. Hanoi's streets were blanketed in red banners, its people pouring out not in submission, but in celebration. From balconies, from bicycles, from every corner, flags waved, not as tokens of compulsion, but as echoes of a nation's hard-won sovereignty. Hayes recorded relentlessly, but behind the camera he was unsettled. His mind whispered the words he dared not admit. Perhaps this was not staged at all. Perhaps this was the pulse of a nation that had risen from the ashes of devastation to stand unyielding on the world stage. In that moment, Richard Hayes was forced to confront a truth far sharper than any headline. Vietnam was no longer the fragile, war-shattered land he expected to expose, but a country whose resilience had transformed into undeniable strength and whose unity could no longer be dismissed as theater.
David Collins, an American journalist, walked through Hanoi with his camera, notebook, and a conviction that nothing he saw was authentic. Every flag, every banner, every orderly smile became to him a carefully orchestrated illusion. He noted with cold certainty, too synchronized to be spontaneous, too polished to be natural. On the streets, he saw volunteers in green uniforms guiding traffic with radiant smiles, students waving small flags, and even an elderly woman pedaling a bicycle with the national flag tied to the front. To his eyes, none of it was genuine. Every gesture was a performance, every smile a rehearsed act. The authenticity of human emotion was reduced to props on a stage he was convinced had been meticulously scripted. When he asked a security guard whether people were paid or counted to attend, the man laughed and dismissed the question with a simple answer. "Anyone who wishes comes. We only keep order." To David, such ease was evidence not of sincerity, but of a cover-up. He turned to a group of students. They replied naturally that no one forced them, no one distributed flags, that they came out of excitement. Yet David dismissed their words as memorized lines, proof of manipulation. Even in a small tea shop, when the owner burst into laughter at his suggestion of payment for attendance, he remained unmoved. Genuine laughter, honest confusion, all were interpreted as camouflage for a larger machinery of control. In the editing room, his bias dictated his craft. He cut, spliced, and subtitled the footage to impose ambiguity where none existed. The laughter of students, the calm words of a guard, the playful tone of a shopkeeper, all recast into a narrative of coercion and spectacle. Within an hour of publishing, his video was shared widely, drawing comments that reinforced his assumptions. Vietnam excels at appearances. The poor must obey attendance rules. With each affirmation, David felt the satisfaction of building another brick into his fortress of prejudice. From the hotel window that night, Hanoi's lights shimmered. To any ordinary observer, it was a city alive, vibrant, and unfiltered. But through David's eyes, it was nothing more than a colossal theater, millions of citizens reduced to extras in a national drama. Every sound, every glance, every burst of laughter was locked within his single, immovable label: artificial. And yet, even as he savored the validation of online applause, an unfamiliar weight began to settle inside him. A subtle fracture in his certainty, a shadow of doubt he could not yet name. Later, at the International Press Center, surrounded by correspondents from around the globe, David maintained his air of superiority. Then he met Michael Tran, a Vietnamese-American journalist from Australia. Calm and precise, Michael extended his hand and said with quiet firmness, "Journalism is not about proving what we already believe. It is about facing truth, even when it contradicts us." The words landed like a stone in still water. For the first time, David faltered. He responded with defiance, insisting he had seen the same script repeated everywhere, but beneath his hardened tone, the first fissures had already appeared. The walls of bias he had built so carefully were not indestructible. In the smallest details he dismissed, the smile of a student, the laughter of a shopkeeper, lay the seeds of collapse. The truth, unyielding and uninvited, was waiting to break through.
Robert did not argue. Instead, he reached into his coat and carefully unfolded an old, yellowed local newspaper, placing it in front of James. "Read this." James frowned, scanning a short, unembellished article. It described a 73-year-old veteran whose lifelong dream was simply to witness his nation's military parade, once living on the outskirts of Virginia. His legs had weakened over the years, yet he still longed to travel to Washington, D.C., to sit among the crowd just to see the young soldiers march in unison. The closing line struck with force. "If possible, I will go, even if I must lean on my cane." James lowered the paper in silence. His instinctive skepticism rose. Perhaps it was staged sentiment, perhaps crafted for effect, but Robert's steady gaze challenged him to dismiss it outright. "Why show me this?" James asked sharply. Robert's reply was calm yet unyielding. "No reason. I do not intend to persuade you. I only want you to know there are men who march not by force, but by memory, by pride, by a small dream. The rest you must see for yourself." James forced a smile. "You truly believe a man over 70 would endure all that just to watch a few steps in a parade?" Robert's answer was cutting in its clarity. A person can live an entire lifetime for one moment of witnessing what he values most. Not everything is measured by politics or logic. Sometimes memory alone is strong enough to push frail legs into the street. The room fell still. James studied the brief article again. Its simplicity unsettled him. If it were propaganda, why so plain? Why no exaggerated images, no flowery lines? He folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket, but the crease on his brow betrayed the first fracture in his certainty. That night, back at his hotel, James replayed the footage he had edited, the students' smiles, the guards' words, the vendor's glance, stitched together as proof of coercion. He had once been satisfied, yet now the images rang hollow. The newspaper in his pocket was like a stone cast upon calm water, rippling through every assumption. He scrawled a terse note in his journal. "Veteran must be verified." The words looked foreign even to him. For the first time on this assignment, he could not sleep. Through the window, Washington's nightlights glowed. Amid the hum of traffic, he imagined the figure of an old man, cane in hand, eyes alight, waiting to see young soldiers march. That vision haunted him, breaking through the rigid narrative he had built. At dawn, James left the hotel earlier than usual. The city stirred under a thin mist, the streets swelling with noise and motion. His camera was packed, his notebook ready, and in his chest pocket lay Robert's folded newspaper. Each step drew him back to the veteran described in those lines. If such a man existed, James resolved, he would find him and expose truth, whether staged or genuine. Near the crowded avenue leading to the Capitol, he stopped. There by the sidewalk, he saw a frail figure dragging a worn wooden chair, each step labored, hands trembling yet eyes ablaze. The old man set the chair down, wiped sweat from his brow, and sat, clutching a small flag. James instinctively raised his camera, capturing the fragile yet defiant presence before him. The veteran, Mr. Lewis himself, answered his broken English greeting with a gentle smile and steady voice. "No one invited me. I came on my own." Lifting the flag with trembling hands, his gaze fixed on the parade ground. His words were simple yet unassailable. "Rest is for every day. To see soldiers march, this may be the only chance in a lifetime." In that instant, James' narrative collapsed. This was not coercion. This was choice. Not performance, but conviction. His notebook suddenly felt unbearably heavy. He could not deny what stood before him, a living truth that shattered every doubt.
Under the relentless sun of Hanoi, Michael, an American journalist, found himself increasingly unsettled. He had filmed an elderly man, Mr. Tron, his frail hands trembling as he clutched a flag, his eyes radiating a light too vivid to be dismissed as mere performance. The scene was simple, yet its authenticity pierced Michael's assumptions. It reminded him of his own father, a war veteran in the United States, who once sat silently for hours at memorials, chasing the ghosts of memory without anyone compelling him. That parallel cracked a fissure in Michael's rigid narrative. Perhaps not every image was staged. Perhaps not every gesture was orchestrated. Later, wandering the narrow streets near Baiding, Michael encountered another figure, Mr. Nguyen, a middle-aged laborer from Nam Dinh. His face darkened by sun, his shirt soaked in sweat, his old tricycle cart bound with small flags. Everything about him bore the mark of authentic hardship. When questioned, Nguyen's reply was blunt. "I work freely. No one forces me. I came all night by myself just to see the soldiers, to satisfy a memory." His words struck like a hammer blow. Memory itself had become a form of voluntary devotion, a force stronger than command or coercion. Michael filmed each frame, yet inside he fought to reconcile it. His notes betrayed hesitation, self-driven, difficult to classify, maybe embellished. But he knew those last words, maybe embellished, were not truth, only a shield against collapse of his own bias. That night, Nguyen's laughter and Tron's gentle smile fused into a single contradiction. Both men embodied a voluntary presence, driven by remembrance and longing, not by orders. Michael's ideological fortress shook. For the first time, he feared that reality did not conform to the script he was expected to deliver to New York. The following day near Hyangkwang Lake, Michael confronted another scene. A group of teenagers gathered, no teachers, no organizers, just youthful spontaneity.
They painted flags on their cheeks with school markers, shouted slogans off beat, laughed at their own clumsiness. When asked, they admitted plainly, "We saw it on YouTube. We liked it, so we tried it. No one told us to." This innocence could not be scripted, could not be forced. If someone had orchestrated, why would the chants be chaotic, the drawings childish? Again, Michael's pen faltered. Students self-paint, self-practice, no supervision. Then he tried to salvage the old frame, spirit-seeded earlier, not purely voluntary, but the handwriting betrayed weakness, no longer firm. What he witnessed was not mobilization, but contagion of memory, a spontaneous replication of collective spirit that defied manipulation. In each case, the old veteran, the weary laborer, the laughing youth, the truth converged into one undeniable fact. Voluntary memory and self-driven participation are more powerful than any coercion. For Michael, the walls of prejudice he carried from America fractured under these simple encounters. What was once a rigid belief in manipulation now dissolved into uncertainty. And in that uncertainty lay a revelation. The human heart, when moved by memory, needs no command, no orchestration. It acts by its own will. This was not mere observation. It was a lesson carved with undeniable force. Michael could no longer deny it. The narrative he had built was collapsing under the weight of unfiltered truth.
Everything appeared chaotic, uncoordinated, out of rhythm. Yet within that disorder was something no camera could deny: the truth. This truth was not military precision, nor political slogans, but raw authenticity. Laughter that broke rules, flags painted unevenly on cheeks, awkward but genuine chants of Vietnam rising against the fading sun. As the sky turned crimson, Michael, the American journalist, filmed students by the lake, their silhouettes framed by fire-red clouds. The childish paint on their faces glowed, primitive, yet astonishingly real. That vision dragged him back to his youth in the United States, to nights of messy baseball games with friends, equally out of sync, yet burning with pride. It pierced him, unsettling his chest with an unfamiliar weight. That evening in his hotel, Michael slowed the footage. Radiant smiles, offbeat shouts. For the first time, he resisted the urge to edit away imperfection. He knew any alteration would annihilate that innocence. His notebook bore phrases: the trembling veteran's chair, the tricycle driver's story, the spontaneous students. 3 fragments, all pointing in one direction. The truth did not conform to the narrative he had drafted. Sleep evaded him. Hanoi roared outside, but in his mind replayed the children's laughter and the off-key chorus of their voices. If this was staged, what director on earth could script such clumsy purity? The very question gnawed at him, cracking the fortress of prejudice he once trusted. On the eve of National Day, the city exploded with lights and flood beams, music tests echoing in the air. From his window on Tran Hung Dao Street, Michael saw crowds surging, trucks with flags, children clutching balloons, youth rehearsing chants. The atmosphere swelled, ready to burst into tomorrow. He filmed, but the images of Mr. Lam, the old chair, the exhausted tricycle driver, and those students now overshadowed the red banners repeated endlessly. At his desk, the editing software glowed. He arranged footage, the old man's trembling hands lifting the flag, the driver sweating, the students chanting off-beat but with blazing eyes. He added captions: "Passion is not voluntarism. Behind emotion lies orchestration." For a moment, he hesitated. Was he distorting truth? But habit and the fear of rejection silenced him. New York demanded confirmation of prejudice, not contradiction. He pressed publish. Within minutes, numbers soared. Western comments flooded. Predictable. Communism always fabricates. Relief washed him. Duty complete. Yet a countercurrent struck.
this time from Vietnamese voices. Clips he filmed were shared anew, stripped of his captions, defended with clarity. If coerced, could a 73-year-old walk unassisted to raise a flag? "I joined freely. I wanted to," said the tricycle driver. Students' laughter surfaced as proof of spontaneity, not propaganda. Each rebuttal sliced into him like steel. His own footage, twisted by his hand, was now weaponized against his deceit. Shame burned. He replayed the original cuts, the light in the veteran's eyes, the resolute voice of the driver, the student's unchecked joy. None bore the stain of coercion. Yet, he had manufactured it. Messages from New York urged him to stand firm. The report was surging. Tomorrow's live broadcast awaited. His hands trembled. He could not type a reply. Outside, Hanoi blazed with light, but to him it blurred into haze. In his ears echoed the driver's words, "Memory itself is voluntary," and the riotous laughter of children by the lake.
In the silence of that night, Michael, an American journalist, found himself unable to write. The scattered words in his notebook, war veteran memories, a tricycle driver wiping sweat, students laughing freely, looked less like notes and more like cracks tearing through his certainty. He struck through the phrase, "not voluntary," with heavy hesitation, his pen faltering before dropping to the desk. That night he barely slept. In restless dreams, the images returned. The frail old man on a wooden chair, the humble driver drenched in sweat, the carefree laughter of schoolchildren. No director could have scripted those details. For the first time, Michael realized he was the one bound by prejudice, while the people he filmed were bound by nothing but their truth. On National Day morning, Hanoi unfolded like a stage set by history itself. The skies were crystal clear, streets bathed in golden light, and every balcony and lamppost carried the same red flag. Michael left his hotel at dawn with his camera and notebook, his chest heavy from the sleepless night and the echo of relentless criticism from Vietnamese voices online. Today he would see for himself. At the International Press Stand near Ba Ding Square, more than 50,000 people gathered, dense but astonishingly calm, no pushing, no chaos. When the loudspeakers announced the opening, a sudden silence consumed the crowd. No slogans, no orders, no guiding hand. Tens of thousands fell quiet, as if commanded by a single invisible will. Michael's pulse quickened. He scanned the crowd, but there was no commander, no signal, only a collective discipline born of instinct, a silence, heavy, yet dignified. The armored guard marched in perfect unison, the echo of boots striking pavement reverberating like drums, steady, relentless. Through his lens, Michael captured even the smallest gestures, a soldier gently shifting a comrade's rifle strap, a minor act revealing an ingrained solidarity that could never be staged. Then, on the opposite grandstand, he saw him, the frail elder he remembered. With trembling effort, the old man stood, wooden cane shaking. His hand rose, unsteady, defying his own fragility. At once, young strangers behind him reached forward, one supporting his arm, another steadying his back, only to withdraw immediately, leaving him the dignity of his salute. The nearby crowd quieted further, granting him a sacred space. Michael's throat constricted. No script could create this. No authority could order a 73-year-old man to rise and salute, nor compel dozens to fall silent for him. His lens trembled. The words he had once written, forced, staged, collapsed into emptiness. He whispered rationalizations, but his heart betrayed him. Tears blurred his vision. Across another section of the stands, the crowd naturally parted, allowing children to move forward. Adults bowed slightly, ensuring their sightlines remained clear. No directive, no signboards, no slogans. It was spontaneous consensus, an invisible rhythm binding strangers.
This was not mere discipline. It was what Michael recognized as soft order, a voluntary alignment of hearts, a communal discipline deeper than steel. The armored vehicles rolled past, gleaming machines of state power, but Michael no longer saw them as cold metal. They were only the backdrop to a far greater strength, collective will. He opened his notebook and wrote with trembling hands, 2 layers of discipline, iron and soft, neither directed by any authority. For the first time, his words were not excuses, but acknowledgement. The roar of the crowd rose and fell with the formations, as if breathing in one unified rhythm. And in that moment, Michael knew, if this was performance, then the script was too flawless for human hands. If this was mobilization, then it was the most extraordinary mobilization in the world, where silence itself spoke louder than commands. The sight of that old man's salute tore through every barrier of cynicism, and Michael, for the first time since arriving in Vietnam, felt the weight lift, not because he proved anything, but because he had finally seen truth with his own eyes and his own heart.
Under the blinding studio lights, the microphone captured every breath as Jonathan Miller sat rigid before the camera. The script sent from New York was still glowing on his laptop screen, its last sentence highlighted in bold. But the true level of mobilization remains a question. All he had to do was read it word for word, deliver the segment, and fulfill the network's demand. Technically, it was routine, yet his hand trembled on the keyboard, weighed down by an unseen gravity. In his earpiece, the control room barked sharp commands. Read with authority, Miller. Clear, decisive, no hesitation. He inhaled deeply. In seconds, his face would beam across American living rooms, tens of millions watching. But his mind was no longer with the cold script. Instead, it was consumed by the image of an elderly veteran raising a frail arm in salute, supported by younger hands. He remembered a laborer's gravelly voice insisting, "Memory itself is voluntary," and the laughter of schoolchildren mischanting slogans at the lakeside. He remembered silence, tens of thousands standing together without a single order given. Then the red light ignited. Live broadcast. His opening lines were steady, professional. Today in Hanoi, the stands were flooded with red flags. Tens of thousands packed together. The honor guard marched in precision. Mechanized units advanced in exact rhythm, and execution as orderly as any military parade in the world. He paused for a fraction, eyes on the glowing sentence. The producers pressed. And with the question, no delay, repeat exactly. But the weight inside him burst forth. His grip tightened, his heart pounded, and he spoke words unscripted. I must amend this. What I witness here is not coercion. I see no fabrication. Silence froze the control room before angry shouts exploded. Miller, what the hell are you doing? Stick to the script. Yet it was too late. The words had already crossed oceans, searing into American screens. Social feeds erupted. Half the comments branded him traitor, puppet, propagandist. But another wave surged, Vietnamese voices in English, French, and their own tongue. I was there. No one forced us. Thank you. For the first time, a foreign journalist tells the truth. For the first time in days, he removed one side of his headset. Outside, raw sound poured in, the thunder of boots striking pavement, the anthem swelling, the cheers rising and falling like tides. It was a symphony without a conductor, order without compulsion. He let the camera roll, silent, allowing the people to narrate themselves. From the distant stands, voices began singing, offbeat, imperfect, yet united. His eyes moistened. No director could stage this. Only pride can, he whispered. He knew the bridge home was burned. A French colleague muttered, "You've destroyed your career." Jonathan replied with steel, "Perhaps, but for once I spoke truth." When the feed ended, clips of his words exploded across global platforms. Hate surged, but gratitude multiplied. Veterans, workers, children, faces he had captured now became not subjects, but guardians of the truth he had risked everything to protect.
He sought them out one by one, not as material, but as human beings, asking permission to preserve their images in the context they lived. Each affirmed him with quiet dignity. I stood because I wanted to. I came because memory matters. We played because no one told us not to. These were not rehearsed answers. They were living testimony. And he understood, voluntary spirit cannot be staged. In the end, Jonathan realized his profession had betrayed itself by confusing order with oppression, mistaking discipline for choreography. Journalism, he declared, must never reduce reality to a net of prejudice. It must respect every frame as a fragment of life. His statement to the world was stark. I am not Vietnamese. I have no reason to praise. I only corrected a lens bent by bias. At the airport, a small paper flag rested in his pocket, a child's gift, yet heavier than all his years of reporting. He looked at it once more and whispered, "This is not spectacle, this is collective memory." And with that, Jonathan Miller reclaimed the essence of journalism, to speak truth unflinching, no matter the cost.